Hello and welcome to another exciting lecture for developmental psychology. In this lecture, we're going to be looking at the social emotional development in infancy and early childhood, specifically attachment. So we're going to look at attachment, we're going to look at infant emotional development, we'll look at infant attachment, we'll look at peer relations in infancy, then we'll look at childhood social status, and finish up with childhood friendships. So first, let's start by defining attachment. So attachment in general is going to be a strong affectionate tie that binds a person to an intimate companion. So it's any affectional tie. But we can be more specific by saying that it's a behavioral system through which humans regulate their emotional distress when under threat and achieve security by seeking proximity to another person. Basically, what this is getting at is we form attachments to many people. We don't form just attachments to our caregivers. We don't just form attachments to our loved ones. You form attachments in ways much more minor, but in ways even to coworkers, to friends, to colleagues, various different things where you can form attachments. But the main key point that's going to come in is this seeking proximity when under threat. So who do we seek out when we are under stress, when we're under threat, when things are difficult? This is the people we have the strongest attachment to. If we're talking about attachment, we have to start though with imprinting. So imprinting is something that occurs essentially in most vertebrate species to one degree or another. Many don't have a strong imprinting mechanism, ones that never have a parent. Others have a weak imprinting mechanism, even ones where there really isn't a parent around, they'll form a weak imprinting mechanism. Some others, like certain species of birds and even humans to a lesser extent, have a stronger imprinting. So this imprinting, an innate form of learning in which a young will follow and become attached to a moving object, usually the mother, during a critical period early in life. So what you're seeing in the picture here is where this imprinting is occurring. He was around these, I believe it's geese, at their critical period. So it's right around a day old. They have a critical period. They imprint on something, and imprinting is instinctual. So imprinting is a instinctual thing that occurs. It is a precursor to attachment. It is not attachment itself, because this is basically a genetically defined instinct that occurs. So let's look at the nature-nurture side of imprinting and attachment and how that all goes through. So bonding is the next level. So we've got imprinting as the first level. Bonding is now the next level. Bonding is a more long-term biologically based process, not this immediate thing that occurs during a critical period, but a process which the parent and infant form a connection. And this in humans, it occurs in the first few hours after birth where bonding starts. It continues after this, but bonding actually starts in the first few hours after birth. When the mother is exhilarated from the birth process, her hormone levels are still really high, newborn is highly alert, and this is and I've got it here that this is a lesser form of imprinting, but in a way, this is a more advanced form of imprinting in other ways, because, well, it isn't as strong of a thing as imprinting. So imprinting is this strong connection, but it's very instinctual. Bonding is more of a process that starts out weak but grows stronger and stronger. What is the mechanism for bonding? We talked about this in an earlier chapter. The mechanism for bonding is oxytocin. Then there's the nurture side. So the nurture side is where basically through interactions with caregivers, the relationship between the parent and the offspring that starts out with bonding forms into a internal working model of what should occur and what expectations, and basically through learning and through interaction, that bonding turns into more, and that bonding turns into more through this nurture side that then eventually becomes our first attachments. We should look at that there are essentially two social worlds in childhood that children have. Um, the first is the adult-child relationship. And during infancy and early childhood, this is the central social world of the child. There are multiple forms here. A child could form an attachment to a parent, to the other parent, to babysitters, to other caregivers, to teachers as that starts. So the adult-child relationships are central. They're not the only, but they're central until about age 6. Then there is the peer relationships. This is the other social world. So peer relationships are relationships with other children. And I should point out that if the other child is old enough, it comes into play more as adult child. Not fully adult child, but it's more of an adult child than it is peer when one child is much older than the other. But our peer relationships also have multiple forms. We form different relationships and attachments to different people and different friends. We have close friends, not so close friends, just acquaintances, all of that. So that's what it means by multiple forms. Let's talk about emotions. So emotions, there's two different main types of emotions. There's the primary or the basic emotions. These are the ones that are more biologically based. And then there's the secondary emotions, which we'll talk about on the next slide, which are more of the social emotions, the self-conscious emotions. But the primary or basic emotions are the first emotions to appear. These are also the emotions that just about all species, not just primate, but all vertebrate species that we know of show to one extent or another, especially when we get into mammals and beyond that. Some of the reptiles before that don't show it as strongly, but they do have them still. But definitely mammal species show these primary or basic emotions. And that is one thing that need to bring up, because it used to be believed that animals didn't have emotions. Anybody who has a dog knows, or even cats know, that animals have emotions. It's just they are measured in different ways. Let's look at these primary or how it works with infancy. So at birth, babies show the primary emotion of contentment, interest, distress. These are the basic three primary emotions that infants show, or that babies show at birth, but there is more primary or basic emotions than these. So by about 3 months of age, the contentment becomes joy or excitement. So that joy, happiness is one of the primary emotions. Interest converts into surprise. Distress evolves into a range of negative emotions such as disgust, sadness. As early as 4 months, anger will start to appear. As early as 5 months, fear is displayed. Sometimes fear can be displayed earlier, especially if the infant has been given reasons to fear. So fear can come about earlier in negative situations. So these are your basic emotions, and these basic emotions are very biologically based, and they show up early on in infancy. And as I said, these are the emotions that you can see in other species as well. The secondary or self-conscious emotions are ones that are more related to self-awareness. They're more related to environmental learning. And humans aren't unique in having secondary emotions as well, but most species do not have the secondary emotions. Again, if you've got dogs, you've seen dogs express guilt, shame, things like that, so you know that dogs, other species do have these secondary emotions. It's just we look at it more in humans because humans is where we can definitively measure it. So by 18 months of age, infants will begin to show embarrassment. To be able to show embarrassment, you need to be able to have self-reflection. You need to know that you should be embarrassed to show embarrassment. The same with the others. Around age of 2, a little bit older, the other self-conscious emotions, the ones pride, shame, guilt, things like that emerge. And again, to even feel these, let alone be able to express them, to feel these, you need to be aware of the need for pride, the need for shame, the need for guilt. So it's considered the self-conscious emotions because you have to have enough self-reflection to be able to realize that you should be shameful or guilty, that type of thing. Which again, we see these types of emotions in primates. We see these types of emotions in elephants, in dogs. Dogs have learned these self-conscious emotions from co-evolving with humans. So that's, I believe, the reason that's there. Wolves do not show these self-conscious emotions. So the fact that dogs show them came from the coevolution with humans that occurred with dogs. So kind of related to this, but not directly the emotions themselves, is social referencing. So starting at around 1 year old, infants begin to monitor companions' behavior, emotions, reactions. So I've got here their emotional reactions, but it's also their behavior and any types of physical reactions. But they monitor their companions, especially their caregivers, when they're in ambiguous situations. And then they use this information to decide how they should feel and behave. So this is a really interesting one because we know things like infants don't have a natural fear of insects. Infants, when exposed to insects, will try to play with them, put them in their mouth, all of those types of things, because they don't have this natural instinct to be afraid of insects. However, starting at about 1 year of age, they start referencing what their caregivers are doing in response to certain things like insects. So if their caregiver acts afraid of a spider when they see it, then they learn that they should be fearful of spiders. Then starting around this age, instead of trying to play with it, play with the spider, put the spider in their mouth, things like that, they will now show the fear of spiders. They can be earlier, but typically it's around 1 year of age where this mainly starts. So if you have a huge phobia of something like spiders, and I use the word phobia loosely because phobia is something that's a different type of social learning. But if you have a big fear of something like spiders or insects, you can blame probably, well, likely you can blame one of your parents. Probably your mom is the one you can blame for this. Because usually that's the caregiver that the infants are around the most. Again, it's not ubiquitous, it's not universal. Could be another caregiver, could be a babysitter, could be things like that, could be a father. But um, the fact is that if you have a fear of things like spiders, it's due to at around 1 year old, you witness somebody else being afraid of spiders, and now that transitioned to you. So back to attachment. So we've looked at this social referencing and how people look to those around them. We looked at the emotions and how those tie in. We started with imprinting and bonding. Now let's go through this process of infant attachment. So starting out, there's this undiscriminating social responsiveness. So from birth to about 2 to 3 months old, bonding happens, but infants this age will respond socially to just about anybody who handles them in a very similar way. From about 2 to 3 months on, up until about 6 to 7 months, infants start discriminating. So they start having a preference for certain caregivers. They start responding differently to different caregivers, that type of thing. Then after 6 to 7 months, especially when they can start crawling, and then eventually walking, they transition into active proximity seeking, or what we would refer to as true attachment. So in this case, they are actively seeking out specific caregivers, especially when they're in distress. And then from 3 years on, you get a goal-corrected partnership. So this isn't a one-way attachment. This now is where partnerships form, and now attachments aren't just formed to adults. Attachments can be formed to other children, to older siblings, all of that. So this is where it's not just a one-way street, where this partnership or attachment becomes two-way. Let's watch a video.
Attachment is a strong, enduring bond that develops between a child and his or her caregiver. Attachment forms through a reciprocal relationship between a caregiver and an infant. 6-week-old Iselin cries, and her mother responds by picking her up and comforting her, responding sensitively to the child's needs. Over time, as Lynette continues to be responsive to the needs and cues Iselin exhibits, she and her child will likely develop synchrony, or reciprocal cooperative interactions that help build strong attachments.
Did you get a boo-boo? What happened to you? Can you show me?
Initially, children show a preference for human contact in general and accept the comfort of a stranger without a fuss. Over time, however, they begin to show a strong preference for the people who care for them the most, usually the parents. As specific attachments develop, infants begin to show both a fear of strangers and separation anxiety.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really nice. Is he your friend?
Stranger anxiety is typically manifested between 7 and 9 months of age. 9-month-old Hannah is obviously distressed when held by an unfamiliar adult. She reaches for her mother, cries, and shows great relief when reunited with Mom.
Yes, there you go. Is that the baby?
Separation anxiety begins at about 8 or 9 months of age and peaks between 12 and 24 months. 9-month-old Olivia is anxious and upset when Mom leaves the room, but is easily comforted on her return.
Oh. What is that?
As children and parents interact over time, separation anxiety decreases. Children begin to understand that separations are temporary and are comforted by a variety of familiar caregivers.
It's okay. Do you want this? Huh? Do you want to use it? You say no. Oh, Jenna, do you want to use it? We have to ask William. Is it all right? Is it okay? Okay, you know what? I got these for William. I'm going to get you some too. All right? Hey, William, you stay and play here, and I'm going to help Jenna. All right? Jenna would like some too. All right. We'll find you a truck. Nice building, Rachel. John making that tower.
let's look at a couple things from that video. So infants experience attachment-related fears as they grow older. The first of them to look at is separation anxiety, and it's normal, and it typically appears when infants are forming their first genuine attachments to their parents. So it can start relatively early as 4 months, peaks between 14 and 18 months, and gradually becomes less frequent and intense, but can last even, especially in infants who maybe have attachment issues, that it can last into 3, 4, even later. Then the next one is stranger anxiety, and early on, infants don't have that discrimination, but as they start to develop a preference for their own caregivers, then they develop stranger anxiety. So the anxious reactions, they become common at 8 to 10 months, continue through the first year, and gradually decline in intensity over the second year. So it can be quite a while, and it's one of those where they're forming their attachments and they're seeking out those they've got their attachment to. So when they encounter someone who they don't have an attachment to, it gives them the anxiety and the fear. Next, let's talk about the strange situation. So the strange situation, you saw a bit of it in the previous video when the parent left and came back. That wasn't exactly a strange situation, but it's similar. So the strange situation is where infants are subjected to 8 episodes of gradually escalating stress. The point of it isn't to stress out the infants. The point of it is to see their reactions, and we'll watch on the video, and you'll see how when the infant starts being distressed, they cut off that. They just want to see if the infant gets distressed in specific situations. So that's 8 episodes of escalating stress. The caregiver will depart, return, adult strangers will approach them, all of those. And the quality of attachment is characterized into one of 4 types depending on their reactions to these 8 specific predefined episodes. They can have secure attachment, resistant attachment, avoidant attachment, or disorganized, disoriented attachment. And we will look at each of these in detail, but before then, let's watch a video. Unfortunately, I can't fast forward the video while recording it, so you've got to watch the first minute and a half of this that I would normally skip. So I am sorry about that, but the first minute and a half is essentially the telling you what you're about to see.
We'll have you do a brief interaction with some play. Then, in just a few minutes, we'll send you back in. You step in the door.
Everett Waters is studying how far our childhood experiences influence our behavior as adults.
We'll come down to the lab.
Okay.
We'll do this now.
This experiment, which I watched through a two-way mirror, is designed to gauge how secure is the crucial relationship between mother and child.
Okay, this bunny is going to go here, and that bunny will be on top.
The value of the test has been established in studies that would watch a child, 1-year-old, and then follow it up and interview them about their relationships to their parents when they were 21 years old. So we're quite confident in the long-term significance of this relationship.
After several minutes' play, the mother is signaled to leave the room.
Sweetie, I'll be back in 1 minute, okay? I'll get you back in 1 minute.
It's upsetting for you. Shame, I feel. But she'll survive. The key moment in the experiment is the child's reaction to her mother's return.
Hi.
The important clue is whether the baby's able to become calmed down by the contact with the mother and get back to play. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. But you see, when the mother was out, she was only interested in the mother, no interest in the toys. Now she has a contact with the mother. She's beginning to show a little interest in the environment, and shortly she'll be right back with the toys where we started.
So you would call this a secure one?
Yes, yes.
She's certainly much happier.
Now, and this is an insecure baby. We get the measure of the baby's play before the separation. When the mother leaves, the baby cries, goes to the door following her. Now, we sent the mother right back in, but the point here is not to distress the baby. We're just trying to challenge it. The baby puts her hands to her face in a sad expression, puts her face down. When she picks her up, she keeps her head down, her arms out, and then she sits in the chair holding the baby. The baby's still sullen. He's low-keyed.
So you would call this insecure attachment?
Yes, insecure. He's avoidant. He's not engaging her, and it's not the reunion's not effective. And it's important to remember here that the thing that upset him was her absence. Her return should be the solution to his problem. Now this is another pattern that we see in babies who are not good at using their mother as a secure base at home. This baby is also insecure. But you'll see, we get a look at his play before the separation. The mother's left, and when she returns, she picks him up. He can't calm down. He's still upset. She offers a toy to amuse him or to comfort him or to distract him, and he slaps it away. She offers another. He slaps it away. He's angry. We call these babies resistant or ambivalent because they both want her back and yet can't use the contact. We think that the difficulty is that in the past, when he sought comfort, she's been inconsistent as to whether she's available and responsive or not.
Do you think these really are indications for vulnerability for depression later in life?
I don't think that insecure attachment in infancy is the cause of depression in adulthood. However, when a child learns that he can trust his mother to be available and responsive, he's beginning to learn that you can trust other people, that you can turn to them when you're in trouble. The baby is also taught by the mother, as he gets older, how to understand his emotions, how to construe events that happen to them. You know, every bump in the road is not a disaster. This is a powerful asset when you encounter difficulties in life.
Let's start with secure attachment there. Strange situation, very, very interesting thing, but secure attachment, it's about 60 to 65% of 1-year-olds fall under secure attachment. This is a child who actively explores the room when alone with the mother. So when the mother is present, the infant will explore around the rest of the room, going away from the mother, but still in the same room, because the mother is a secure base. The infant knows that they can go back to the mother if something occurs. They actually may be upset by separation. Being upset by separation is normal. We talked about that with the separation anxiety. So being upset by separation is normal. May not be as upset. In even times, they may not be upset at all, especially if they're secure enough knowing that their mother's going to come back. But they may be upset by the separation, and that when the mother does come back, they greet the mother warmly. If they were upset, they're comforted by the presence of the mother when she returns. So very easily comforted, and a lower level of distress. The next one is resistant attachment, also called insecure, anxious, ambivalent. I like to call it resistant because the next one's insecure, avoidant. So there's a lot of A's and it's very similar. So resistant attachment, as I said, insecure, anxious, ambivalent. This is about 10% of 1-year-olds. These kids that are anxious, ambivalent have anxious or ambivalent reactions. Doesn't tend to venture off to play when the mother is, even if the mother's present, so will stay close to the mother. When the mother departs, the infant will become distressed, sometimes extremely depressed, or distressed, not depressed, extremely distressed, because the infant's uncertain when the mother will return. That the anxious ambivalent comes from basically instances or past history of being unsure if the mother is going to return or not. So insecure, anxious, ambivalent tend to have abandonment type issues. When the mother returns, the infant will be ambivalent. May try to remain near her, but seems to resent her for having left. May resist her if she tries to make physical contact and pick them up. And also tends to be wary of strangers even when the mother is present. Whereas secure attached babies will be less wary of strangers when the mother is present. Insecure or resistant attachment, they tend to be more wary even when the mother is present. So the mother isn't necessarily a full secure base. Up to 15% are avoidant, insecure avoidant, or just avoidant. These are children who are uninterested in exploring, show little distress when separated from the mother. So when the mother leaves the room, they don't really become distressed there. They seem indifferent when the mother does return. At the same time, they're not particularly wary of strangers, but may avoid them or ignore them just like they avoid and ignore their mothers. And infants who have avoidant attachment seem to have distanced themselves from their parents. So this usually comes from, whereas the last one, the insecure, anxious, ambivalent, comes from inconsistent parenting. So inconsistent parenting, the mother being there inconsistently, and the baby learns that just to not know when the mother is going to come back. Avoidant is just basically comes from mainly neglected. And we'll talk about the next one, how it can, disorganized, disoriented can kind of come from this, but this is more of where their parents aren't seen as a secure base, or the parent, the caregiver that's in there with them, is not seen as a secure base because they basically have been neglected. And then the final one, the 15% at the end, up to 15%, and it's much higher in high-risk families, is the disorganized disoriented. And this is the type of attachment associated with later emotional problems. This is the one because it can come from abuse. Disorganized disoriented usually comes from abuse. When they're reunited with the mother after the mother has left, they may act daze or freeze or lie immobilized because of past history of abuse, and they are afraid of this abuse that could occur. They may seek contact when the mother comes back, but abruptly move away as their mother approaches them, only to seek contact again because they're unsure whether they're going to get punished, especially when you've got inconsistent punishments. So we're not just looking at straight up abuse. If you've got inconsistent punishments, if the child doesn't know why they're being punished for various different things, then they really don't know how to react to their mother. It appears to comes from their inability to devise a consistent strategy for regulating negative emotions such as separation anxiety due to typically inconsistent punishment. If the infant doesn't know why they're being punished, then they can start to show fear or intermittent fear of the caregiver who punishes them without a known reason for the punishment. And in any case, anytime there's abuse, you can start to see this. Next, let's look at styles of parenting with each of these. So first is securely attached infants tend to have parents who are sensitive and responsive to their needs and emotional signals. So securely attached infants have basically parents who are proper caregivers. They're responsive. They notice when the infant needs something and address it. Resistant pattern tends to have parents who are inconsistent in caregiving. The resistant pattern comes from children who don't know when the parent is going to be a caregiver and when they're not. Avoidant tends to come from parents who provide either too little or too much stimulation. So I said when I was talking about it before, parents who are neglectful. But it also comes from parents who give too much stimulation. So parents who become super helicopter parents who are always there, always giving attention, not letting the child explore. They're just always like keeping them close. Well, this avoidance starts to come from that because the infant's just trying to get away. And then the last one, disorganized disoriented. This is again in a high prevalence in infants who are physically abused or maltreated. Let's talk about some factors related to quality of attachment. So the early learning theorists believe that infants basically associated their positive emotional responses to their mother by associating their mother with food, because their mother was the one that fed them. So the early learning theorists basically said that the only attachments or the early attachments that were formed were because of food. In a classic study by Harlow, they tested this in infant monkeys who were fed by either a wire mother or a cuddly cloth-covered mother. I warn you ahead of time, this video is a bit sad, but we are going to watch it because it is relevant.
Let me show you a monkey raised on a nursing wire mother. Now here are 106's two mothers. As you can see, it was weaned on a wire mother. Here's baby 106. Watch.
He's going to the wire mother.
He's got to eat to live.
He's going back.
He's back on the cloth mother, and he'll stay on the cloth mother. Actually, this baby spends from 17 to 18 hours a day on the cloth mother and less than 1 hour a day on the wire mother. We had predicted that the variable of contact comfort would be a variable of measurable importance, but we were unprepared to find that it completely overwhelmed and overshadowed all other variables, including those of nursing.
Frankly, Doctor, if it comes to a choice between wire and cloth, it's reasonable to expect that any child will go to the cloth. It's a matter of creature comfort, like a baby with its blanket. But is this really love?
Well, what do you mean by saying that a baby loves its mother? Certainly one thing we mean is that it gets a great feeling of security in the presence of the mother. Now, Mr. Collingwood, wouldn't you say that if you frightened a baby, that it went running to its mother, was comforted, and then all the fear disappeared and was replaced by a complete sense of security that that baby loved its mother? Now, in this experiment, this is the apparatus we use.
That looks diabolical.
That's just the way the baby monkey feels about it. Flashing eyes, loud sound, moving mechanical parts, all of these things are designed to frighten a monkey. Now here we have a peaceful, resting baby monkey. Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him.
He's scared, all right.
And he does what any child will do in a similar situation.
He runs away.
It's more than running away. He was running to his mother, to touch her, to drive away his fear. Contact with the mother changes his entire personality. Look, now he's actually threatening the diabolical object. All right. This gives us part of the picture of the strength of infantile love. This is a 6-foot square room with a few toys and other objects. But to the monkey, it's much more menacing. We know that when our own children are taken to a strange place without their mothers, they are often overwhelmed with fear. This room is just such a new and strange environment for the baby monkeys. No mother is in there. Now, let's put a monkey into the room. Notice how cautiously he enters the room. He's searching for comfort, but nothing relieves his disturbance. Now we'll take the baby monkey out and put in a wire mother.
Now, this one was nursed by a wire mother.
That's right, all his life.
She doesn't seem to help much.
Now, we'll try the same test with a cloth mother in the room. You see the contrast in the behavior? Despite the fact that the wire mother nursed him, she could offer this infant nothing in the way of affection or security. But here the monkey, by rubbing against the cloth mother, as if he were seeking as much contact comfort as he could get, builds up his reservoir of affection and security. First, his body relaxes as the fear disappears. But above and beyond this, new positive response patterns appear. He now goes out to explore and investigate this new, strange world. He is now a normal, happy, curious baby.
So that was a very interesting video. The ethical considerations aside, that showed that the early learning theorists who believe that it was all about food were actually wrong. It's more all about comfort. Now, we talked about imprinting and how there's this sensitive period for imprinting. There's also a sensitive period for attachment. Whereas the imprinting sensitive period is anything from a few hours to a few days, the attachment sensitive period is basically in the first year of life. So those who are adopted before 1 year old are just as likely to become securely attached to their caregivers as non-adopted children. Though after the first birthday, kids who are raised in before their first birthday with an abuse or in nursing homes where they're not nursing homes, but orphanages where they're not taken care of directly, handled as often, then there is more insecure and disturbed attachments if they aren't adopted before their first birthday. There was a really interesting study where a whole bunch of, I believe it was Romanian children, were adopted. There was a whole bunch that were in orphanages, and a whole bunch were adopted in the U.S., some of them before the age of 1, some of them after the age of 1, and that's one of the main reasons, one of the main things they use to show that after the age of 1, there's these other issues that can arise. Then you got to ask yourself, what about daycare? So if we're talking about these attachments and how these attachments form, well, what about in the case of daycare? How does that work? How does that mean infants become less attached to their caregivers, their parents, because they're not around them as much? What's been shown, though, is infants who experience routine care by someone other than their mothers are not much different than infants that are cared for almost exclusively by their mothers in the various developmental outcomes studied. Infants who received alternative forms of care like daycare or a relative, things like that, even more than 20 hours a week, were no less securely attached to their mothers than infants who were tended exclusively by their mothers. What is more important than the amount of time that's directly spent with their mother, or if they are with a babysitter or a relative or whatever, what's actually more important is quality of parenting and quality of the daycare experience. So daycare experiences where the infants are neglected in the daycare experience, then they can have issues. If the parenting is neglectful, then they can have issues. So the actual quality of care that's given by the parents is the most important. The quality of care that's given by the daycare is the second most important. Looking next at how early attachment relates to later life outcomes. So one thing we know is that securely attached infants turn into preschool children who teachers describe as curious, self-directed, and eager to learn. So secure attachment leads to good peer relations. I'll actually just talk about what's on the bottom at the end. Insecurely attached are less independent. Children who are securely attached as infants are also more socially competent, more able to initiate play activities. They're sensitive to the needs and feelings of other children, and they tend to be more popular. And finally, secure attachment in infancy is linked to positive emotional development and the capacity to cope with stress and regulate emotions in childhood. But one thing we know is that secure attachment in infancy, it's related to good peer relations in childhood. Good peer relations in childhood is related to infant Intimate friendships in adolescence. Intimate friendships in adolescence is related to emotionally positive romantic relationships in early adulthood. So the secure attachment starts a chain of events that leads to the best or the ideal outcomes. So secure attachment is what everyone should be striving for with infants. We're going to look in a little bit on some personality characteristics and in a future set of slides. And when we look at these personality characteristics, we'll be looking at how you can have different personality characteristics that look way different and still get good outcomes. However, when you're talking about the early infant attachments, those you really have one that is strongly related with good positive later life outcomes. So let's look at those infant-peer relations first. So infants show an interest in other babies from a very early age on. Infants have a capacity for sharing, for cooperation, for sympathy, all within the first year. Infants, when you get infants together with other infants, even ones they haven't met, they tend to start sharing and cooperating relatively quick. By 18 months of age, infants are able to engage in simple forms of reciprocal complementary play with others. So this up here, when we're talking about sharing and cooperation, this is prior to the 18 months where they will share a toy. But they won't necessarily play together. They might play with the same thing, but they won't play together. Around 18 months, you really start to see this reciprocal play, meaning might give one thing to take another. Complementary play, meaning they're playing with the same things, on the same things, together. So they might build something together with giant blocks, or they might be racing cars together, or doing various things together. And then towards the end of the second year, infants become proficient at full turn-taking and reciprocal exchange. But this is especially if they're securely attached to their parents. So infants who aren't securely attached have a lower likelihood of this full turn-taking reciprocal exchange in play. Let's move on to the childhood and peer acceptance and popularity in childhood. And there are basically 5 main categories of social status in childhood when it comes to peer relations. And I'm going to talk about each of these: popular, rejected, neglected, controversial, and average. If we were doing a in-class exercise on this specific topic, one of the things I like to do, just as a really brief, really quick, not a big thing, but to have 5 people who think they're good at improv come up. I give each of them one of these statuses secretly with what's on the next few slides, so you know how the kids should act. And then they have to basically interact with each other, and it becomes amusing, and then the class has to guess what it is. But because we didn't do an in-class exercise on this specific one, you guys didn't get to do that. So first one, popular. Popular kids, this one should be pretty self-explanatory. They're well liked by most, and they are rarely disliked. So you're going to see this in a bit of a difference between this and future ones, in that popular are rarely disliked by anyone. And so when we're looking at this status, we're looking at the kids who tend to be liked by everyone or nearly everyone. Popular, as far as the personality characteristics that make up popular, it tends to be affected by things that can't be changed, like physical size, physical attractiveness, intelligence, social competence, well-regulated emotions. So these are the things that would fall into what would be classified as popular, and it again is very much things that are more genetically related or even if they're things that are environmentally related, they're things that aren't as changeable. So it's one of those that it's hard for someone to get these characteristics if they don't already have them. The second category is rejected. So rejected children are rarely liked and often disliked. So these are the ones on the other end of the spectrum. These are the ones that very few people like them, most people dislike them. They may be characterized by things like high levels of aggression, social isolation, submissiveness, oversensitivity to teasing, the ones that are easy to push around. So rejected can be bullies, but rejected actually tend to be the targets of bullies. And these are the ones that basically their high levels of aggression may be in retaliation, but at the same time their high levels of aggression may be towards those below them, even if they're the ones getting bullied by the actual bullies, which we'll come back to in just a second. Then we've got neglected. Neglected is kind of a middle ground that's not average. So we'll talk about average in a minute. But neglected is kids that are basically ignored in many ways. They've got very few people like or dislike them. They will tend to have a few close friends, but for the most part, they're the ones who don't have many friends, but at the same time also aren't disliked. So they may actually have reasonably good social skills, but they may be more introverted, shy, withdrawn, unassertive. But they also characterized by non-aggressive, so they're not hated by those that are bullied, because they don't tend to bully themselves. The next group is the controversial. So the controversial is the one that comes in that I've kind of been hinting at, and controversial are the ones that tend to be bullies. These are kids that sometimes show good social skills and leadership qualities like popular children, but they tend to, unlike popular, they tend to be more aggressive. So they tend to be bullies. They tend to be the ones that are bullying the rejected. So they've got some of those same characteristics, and these are the ones where when we're talking about liked and disliked, they've got a percentage of people who like them and a percentage of people who dislike them, and very few who are neutral on them. So they are either liked or disliked, not the neutral, whereas the neglected on the previous one are very few like or dislike. And when we're talking about popular, most people like, very few dislike. With controversial, you've got a mix of the two. So you've got a big percentage that like them and a big percentage that also dislike them. And then finally, we've got the average. The average are just the ones that fall in the middle of both liked and disliked scales. That there are some people like them, some people dislike them. They're not necessarily aggressive, so they don't fall under that controversial bullies. They're not like the neglected, where people don't really pay attention to them. They're more of just the average. This leads us to childhood friendships, which is the last thing we're going to talk about in this set of slides. So childhood friendships is really important in childhood. So having friends increases the odds that children will be happy and socially competent, if I can say the word. So having friends is very important. So having these friendships, it comes down to the fact that children who have good friendships tend to be the most well-adjusted. That being said, those attachments we were talking about really do predict friendships. Those with more secure attachments tend to have better friendships. Those with less secure attachments, they may still have friendships, but they may not have as many or as good of friendships. Having friends does reduce the odds that a child will be lonely and depressed because they've got someone to turn to. Friendships do pave the way for romantic relationships in adolescence. So those who have the best friendships in childhood tend to be the ones who are easiest, or who have the easiest time forming relationships in adolescence. It's not with the same individuals. The point is a lot of these social skills that you need for relationships are learned with childhood friendships. And friends do provide social support. So stressful events in children's lives, like parents' divorce, death of a parent, things like that, having strong friendships actually allows the children to be better adjusted as a result. So in conclusion, we talked about attachment, we looked at infant emotional development, looked at specifically infant attachment and bonding and imprinting, all that. We looked then at infant peer relationships, childhood social status, and finished up with childhood friendships. Thanks. Come on back.